What is up, Ravens Flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin, and another opportunity to grace us with his presence is Jason Pruitt, friend and familiar face on the show from Draftplex. And if you guys don't know, one of the most accurate drafters amongst the talking heads in the drafting world. So we appreciate it. Jason, how you doing tonight, man?
Oh, we're doing good. We're full, knee deep in the process now, and it's just going to get, a little bit deeper as we go along. So, looking ahead to some good things here over the next month.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a draft that's got more anticipation, especially when you consider what's already happened in free agency.
The fireworks are just nonstop.
A whirlwind, right? I think I saw that there was a total of 39 Pro Bowls between the traded players just this offseason. So insane offseason, but really pumped for the draft. And we thought, me and Jimbo thought a good place to touch on, a little more heavily would be the center position. And the reason being, of course, they are right now without their current starter. He's now a Carolina Panther, Bradley Bozeman, and no obvious, plug and play replacements that I think the fan base would be thrilled about currently on the roster, and not a ton out there left on free agency. So that's where we're going to start our series of positional videos with Jason here. And I got to start right at the top, Jason, because when we had you on last, you were very high on Tyler Linderbaum out of Iowa, but that was before, I think, the combine. That was very early in your evaluation process and others' evaluation process. So I'm curious, what is your impression of Tyler Linderbaum with a little more time and a little more information at hand?
Yeah, I think looking at kind of how the landscape has changed a little bit, I think he's still center number one, first of all, and I still think he's a first-round player. I've had him pretty high coming in. He's going to drop a little bit because I just think the perception coming in from the scouts and the organizations, the front office. You look at the kind of the things we talked about, the measurables. So smaller, short-armed guy. He didn't work out the combines. He's still recovering from a foot injury. I think it was from the bowl game that they were in. So I think at least the window for him to be drafted, I don't think there's a chance he goes in that first half unless the Ravens decide to take him. I think that's probably going to be the spot number one you have to start looking at. But I think his ceiling for where he goes is going to be in the teens. But I think the more likely prospect of where you're going to start seeing him is going to be in the 20s. Probably closer to the end of the first round. So doesn't mean that the player is not good. It's just he doesn't always check the boxes with everything that he's got going for him. He'll be in the right place. Like, that's for one thing. Like, assignment wise, this is the guy that's going to be very intelligent. He's going to get where he can move. He's very mobile. But the concern, I think, is going to be the size. It's going to be the scheme fit. And then it's going to be, how well he could hold up at that size with the NFL level. College is obviously a different game. You'll see 240-pound defensive tackles and that kind of thing. In the NFL, it's a little bit different than that. So if you're looking at Tyler Linderbaum, I think 14, where the Ravens are currently, is a good place. You could probably even afford to maybe drop back based on how some of these other positions, the depth is kind of starting to emerge even more so. So, into the early 20s, might be a possibility where you could still look at him. I think if you look to get him to slip out of the first round, it's still possible that happens, just again because of all the deficiencies. As I've heard, one of the buzzwords this year is talking about how some of the players who are beyond that, they're not going to be perfect prospects, and same goes for basically everybody in this draft, because I don't think that there's not that one player that's above anybody else. This has been considered more of a depth draft as opposed to top heavy. But as far as Tyler Linderbaum concerned, still a first round player, still the top center in the draft. But yeah, I think the buzz has cooled a little bit, and some other players have moved up the board because of how their offseason has progressed with the combine testing, with the pro days. So still a consideration there, but those things you do have to consider as you move forward with the draft.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, NFL.com has him listed at 296, and it seems to be a whisper of a thing these days, apparently at his position. But my question to you is, at 14, then, say the Ravens stay pat, because one of the things I don't see happening in this draft, which is traditional for the Baltimore Ravens, is, and I don't see them moving back based on the volume of picks that they have this year. That's just how I see it. Definitely, it could happen. I wouldn't bet against them doing that because that's what they do in a lot of times. So my question is, if they stay at 14, is that a reach then, right? Like in your mind, does that become a reach based on some of the deficiencies that he has?
No, I don't think so because of just the nature of this draft at the top. I think, I would be very surprised if there's a chalk draft of well, these players are all going in order of how we kind of thought they were. So I would expect as we do, get into the mock draft season, as a lot of people already are way down into that. I haven't done my first yet. It's going to be very different on draft night. I just feel like this is very much a preference and flavor draft, from the edge rushers to the wide receivers, these offensive tackles. It's all over the map how teams are going to perceive that. I think Linderbaum is definitely in that mix. I don't think at 14 that would be a reach. I don't think you're going to be missing out unless somebody just, by the nature of it, falls and slips to that point where you just there's a blinking red light. It's we have to take this guy regardless of the need. I don't really foresee that happening. So I wouldn't say that if you took the center there at 14, it would be considered a reach unless just something wild happened in terms of how these players come off the board.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jimmy brought up his weight, now I know that was a bit more of his combine weight. Would you say he was playing at 296, or do you think that was more he beefed up because he realized he had to put on a couple pounds?
No, I mean, I would say he probably played right around that 300-pound mark. I think, even the whole time he was there, it was kind of 292 to 296. He
Okay.
didn't look significantly lighter. I mean, some of these players, you can look on the tape and see yeah, that doesn't add up, whether it's the height, whether it's the weight. You see that with cornerbacks, the guys coming into the combine, they weigh in 175 or 180, and they're listed at 200. And you could tell if a player is significantly lighter, especially on the offensive line. I figured him for right about that 300-pound mark. And, I think the one concern is that Iowa has a pretty significant, obviously, offensive line lineage with these guys coming in the league every year. So they have a good strength and conditioning program. And his weight just hasn't gone up. And that's just a factor of his physical form is probably maxed out in terms of what kind of weight he can add. And if he were to add that much more weight, it probably wouldn't be good. It would probably, lessen his mobility just to put on pounds. Like I said, I think he seems to handle power pretty well.
Okay.
And his technique and his movement is going to help him with that, because he's not going to necessarily be in a position in the right scheme where he's just going to have to stand in front of, a 320, 330, up to 350-pound nose tackle and just hold that guy in place. They'll probably keep him on the move and use, his strengths as opposed to, limiting what his advantages are by just having him be a stand-in-place blocker.
All right, so you've cooled off. Well, the market seems to have cooled a little bit on Lindenbaum, and yours as well. But however, it sounds like like you mentioned, you wouldn't consider it a reach, certainly based on the fit for the Baltimore Ravens. But my follow-up question would be, what do you see the rest of the roster being for the center position? Say the Ravens decide to do something sexier, take a edge rusher or something else, and they still have that need later on in the draft. Who do you see as some other prospects that would fit based on
They
what
gotta
you know
start
about
what
the
day
Ravens
one.
drafting, right?
Yeah, day one's going to be Linderbaum only. I think you have a possibility of there's a couple of players that have played center before, but not to any extent. Zion Johnson has played there, and I think most are considering him guard number one now. You could move him inside. He did that a little bit at the Senior Bowl, but I don't know if you go in with that expectation that he's going to be your day one starting center. Certainly he's capable at guard. I mean, I think he's a plug and play guard, and he's probably late in the first round, that's where he's going to go. But I don't know if that would be your plan, saying, hey, we're going to take this guy, we're going to convert him to center, and that's what he's going to be moving forward. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you would have to expect a learning curve if you were to have to bring him in to do that. I think once you get into day 2, there's a couple of possibilities. You look at a couple of Senior Bowl guys where it was a conversion, and again, day 2, there's less of I think an urgency to say, this is the guy we're going to plug in. You would hope to have somebody in place, a veteran, even it's somebody that's a stopgap for maybe half a season, and you could bring somebody like Dylan Parham or Cole Strange along. I think these are the 2 names you'll probably see as kind of being, floating in that center 2 position. But again, both of these guys are guards, and they tried him out there. Again, I think we mentioned the last time that I was on, there wasn't a true center other than Luke Fortner who was there. And I think Luke Fortner is a possibility as well. It's kind of that 3rd round range. And then another prospect that I had was Alec Lindstrom, who I bumped him down a little bit just because I think, the power side, like he's kind of a budget Linderbaum in terms of the technique is good. Not so sure if he handles power as well. But I still think he's kind of in that 3rd, 4th round range. And then we had a couple of players I think that put on a good show at the combine. Cam Jurgens out of Nebraska, who is definitely for sure the discount Linderbaum there, probably on early day 3, because he's very fast, very mobile, really aggressive. I mean, it's the guy you'll see blocking somebody 40 yards down the field. So again, I think his stock is rising a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see him maybe hit the top 100, depending on what the center needs are across the league. Again, I haven't gotten that far post free agency to see where all the cards have fallen. And then Zach Tom, I thought was pretty impressive at the combine with how he moved around. And here's a guy that's another one that's played kind of all across the line. He's been a tackle. He's been a center. He's out of Wake Forest. But I think he's probably like maybe a 5th, 6th round possibility. And once you get past there, it's kind of like a grab bag of guys that have some experience there, but you don't know how well they're going to come in as kind of an initial. You probably wouldn't put them on, the first line and have them starting right away. It'd be kind of like somebody you'd want to develop and bring along and get into an NFL weight program and get stronger and coach him up a little bit. So there's a little bit more decent depth that I looked at as I went through my phase 2 of evaluations for some of the the less heralded prospects. But again, once you get past Linderbaum, there's something you're going to have to do, whether it's a conversion, whether it's, hope for the best with somebody like Luke Fortner, Cam Jurgens, or, hope that one of these diamonds you unearth and mine and can turn into an NFL starter.
So Glenn, it sounds like, just like you mentioned, I mean, we need a day 1 guy.
Just Linderbaum or bust.
Right. Can we just write him in now at 14?
I mean, it certainly sounds like it. Last question I have is about his length. It's showing that he measured just over 31 inches with 31 and an eighth. I know this is kind of putting you on the spot here, but can you recall a player with that short of measurements as far as arm length making that transition successfully into the league, or is that unheard of at that length?
No, I don't think it's unheard of. I honestly, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head because I don't necessarily do comps, so that like I couldn't say, well, he equates to this person in terms of all the measurables that happen.
Okay.
That said, the 31 and an eighth is not ideal for arm length, definitely across any offensive lineman. Center is the best place you can get away with some arms that are that short. And I know we look at it like, oh, how long does an inch make a difference on fingers?
Oh, every 1/8 of an inch counts, baby.
Yeah,
that's what I told my wife. Was that too much? All right, sorry.
It's a family show, Glenn.
Sorry.
Well, you were talking about Kenny Pickett's hands. That's
exactly
what the topic of conversation.
Right.
Because he did grow
all of a sudden
that hand span.
All of a sudden,
1/8 of an inch between the combine and his pro day. So that's what we're talking about because it does matter. That's the difference between going.
He told a significant other. He said, "Look, babe, I'm at the gym working on my length."
That's right.
getting the massage going in to kind of work out that whatever double jointed kind of condition that he has with his hands. There's a lot to talk about in terms of hand span. There's a lot we can evaluate there with how the football is held. Going back to the center position, I think the arm length is always going to be a question. I think 33, I think, has usually been the benchmark for like interior offensive line. Obviously, once you get to the outside, those guys with like 34 or 35 inch arms, these massive pterodactyls with the 85-inch wingspan, across the whole chest to tip on the fingers. So yeah, it matters from the standpoint of, well, are you going to get, first contact in there? But in the end, what are you going to do in terms of doing that? It's your hope would be that he's quick enough off the ball that he can get into a guy's chest before that arm length really makes a difference. I think he's shown that, but again, in the NFL, you're dealing with scouts that if it doesn't meet whatever box that it was, they'll throw a guy off the board,
it's so
with
rigid,
no problem.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, we'll hope for the best here because it seems like
Yeah.
we've kind of. I don't know. This seems like a pick that the Ravens
might
gotta
have
do
to make. They
something.
might
Right.
have to make it, and they might not necessarily want to make it. But
Right.
you got to have someone to snap the ball to Lamar.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know what you guys think.
Yeah.
The market has kind of cooled a little bit, but we're Jason has reassured us that it is not a reach at 14, and
Yeah.
we should still be extremely happy. Give us your thoughts below, and we'll talk to you.